Here. Hi everyone, welcome. This is Lucas Hall from Landlordology and Cozy, and today we are doing a Q&A webinar. This is all about answering your questions. I have a podcast show that we do on Landlordology. It's called Ask Lucas, and I started getting more questions than I could answer. And so what we did is, I thought, well, let's just put it on a webinar. Let's just have it and make it open, and then people can submit questions beforehand and submit questions during the webinar, and we will answer them to the best of our ability. So I should preface that with saying that I am an experienced landlord. I handle tenants and rental properties with care and with pride. I definitely pride my business, and I definitely try to teach my tenants how to be better tenants and how to have a healthy relationship with their landlord. So it's not all about just the money, but it's about a good quality relationship and customer service. And I am not a lawyer. So I'm going to pause. Say that again. I am not a lawyer. Please, please, please do not expect a legal answer or legal advice, because I cannot give you one. Any advice that I do give will not be legal advice, and you should certainly talk to an attorney, a local attorney in your state at the minimum, if not in your town or city, who is familiar with your state laws and with your county laws and your city laws for landlord-tenant relations, because sometimes you really do need legal advice, and that's not me. But I will give you best practice advice, and I'll teach you how to make more money, and I'll teach you how to screen tenants better and how to collect rent on time and all these other things, which are 90% of the game. So thank you for attending. We have a lot of people already on, and I'm super excited to see everyone here. A lot of names I recognize too, just friends that I've made through the years. So thank you again for attending. Okay, so let's get rolling. Again, I am Lucas Hall. I'm a project management professional. That is not a property management professional, but it's a project management professional certification. And that just means I'm able to get stuff done. It's a real certification. It's very hard to get. But I've also been a landlord for 10 years. I have 5 properties in 3 states and about 17 tenants at any given time. So I've been doing this for a long time. Relatively, I guess. Depends on if you think 10 years is a long time. But I love it, and I used to be an IT consultant for DoD. I worked for the government as a consultant and helped them build some of the largest databases in the world. I worked with Treasury, worked with General Services Administration, and just helped them do a lot of things with technology. So I got very good at knowing how technology should work. And so I've applied a lot of that to landlording, and that's why how I was able to build Landlordology, and how I've been able to work with and as part of Cozy on Team Cozy to build, in my opinion, the best property management software out there. There's a lot of tools out there, but Cozy is like no other. So those are my 2 rules. I also want to talk about our guest host here. Her name is Maggie Cooper. She is also on Team Cozy, and she and I work very closely together. She is the Director of Customer Relations. I'm sorry, that is the title I gave her in my head. She is the Customer Success Manager, which is very similar. But anyway, she also works with a lot of the customers and landlords and property managers that we have here at Cozy. Anybody with more than about 20 units, Maggie is on top of that and totally interacting with those landlords and property managers to make sure that they're happy, they're successful, they're using Cozy to the best of their ability, and she's been a great addition to the team this year. Maggie, do you want to say hi?
Yeah, hello everyone. Thanks for joining, and great to meet you all.
Okay, cool. Maggie, we don't hear you, but that's okay. Let's do this. Let me go back to my slide. There you are. Hey.
All right. Sorry, technical issues. Do you want to get started with the questions, Lucas?
Muted, I think. Let's see. How about now?
How about now?
Okay, let's see what we can do. See, this is why we're working out the kinks. What can I do?
Can you hear me now?
Nope, I can't hear you. If anyone can hear Maggie, go ahead and put it in the question box. But if you can't, I guess don't say anything. What do we do here? We had this working.
Lucas, maybe we should ditch the video.
It gets a little tricky, you guys. If anyone's ever done webinars with co-hosts, it is quite difficult sometimes to make everything work because everyone's on a different system, on a different IP address. Quite challenging. Okay. Now, Maggie, I'm gonna see what I can do here. It looks like I can't hear you. Can anyone else hear Maggie? Okay, yeah, okay. I can't hear you, but everyone else says they can hear you. So you know what? We're good. Actually, I need to hear you. That's part of this thing. Maggie, her role is that she's going to be actually asking me questions. So let's see.
Are you able to hear me now, okay, Lucas?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Not sure
All right.
that was a problem. That was probably my fault. Thank you, guys. Thank you for being patient. Okay, great. Okay, perfect. Thanks. Now let's continue on. Perfect. There's Maggie. Sorry about messing up your title. So
That's okay.
Cozy. Cozy, as I mentioned, Cozy is modern property management software, and I use it for all of my properties. I'm on Team Cozy. I'm an employee at Cozy, and Landlordology was an independent entity before, maybe about 2.5 years ago, and was acquired by Cozy as part of their content management or content marketing division and education. So they said, we love what you're doing. We're trying to increase the relationship between landlords and tenants and make that better nationwide. And you're doing that anyway, and we're both doing it, so let's just do it together. And I thought, that's great. Let's do this. So Cozy makes awesome software. It is 100% free for landlords and property managers. We can talk more about that if you have questions. But let me give you a little background on Cozy. So a couple of years ago, about 3 years ago now, we had this idea. Our founders had this idea to just simplify and modernize the rental industry. I mean, really, the rental industry had not changed much from a tech standpoint in the last 50 years. I mean, landlords even now and property managers are still collecting checks and using drop boxes and taking cash and, just a lot of messed up stuff that really could be better. And they approached Google and said, hello, Google, we have this idea to, revolutionize the rental industry. What do you think? And they said, that sounds great. We're 100% behind you. And they gave Cozy the seed money to get started. Kind of shortly thereafter, because of that, we built a Class A investor team. These are people who support Cozy 100%, believe in our mission, and provide guidance and counsel as we go along. We have Tim Ferriss in the upper right-hand corner. He wrote The 4-Hour Workweek and a bunch of other books. He's a fantastic guy and supporter. Then we have Jason Calacanis on the right-hand side. He has a show called This Week in Startups, and it is a great show. If you've never heard of it, it's a podcast called This Week in Startups, and it interviews a startup every single week that is just killing it. So it's a great way to learn if you have an entrepreneurial spirit. Check them out. Then there's Kevin Rose, who is the founder of Dig. He's the bottom right-hand corner in the red. And then we have Gary Vaynerchuk on the right or left-hand side of your screen. He's in the yellow. He's just a fantastic entrepreneur and genius marketer. And then we have Stuart Butterfield kind of in the middle. He's the founder of Slack and was also the co-founder of Flickr. They're all just amazing supporters of Cozy, and we're proud to have them and just ecstatic that they've been supporting us for 3 years. So continue. So Cozy, as I said, is 100% free. Now, what does that mean, really? Like, really, what does that mean? Because nothing's really 100% free. And what we do, what you get for free, is that you get online marketing and listings. You get the ability to screen tenants with credit reports and background checks. You also get the ability to collect online rent payments for free. There's no transaction fees, no monthly fees, there's nothing. And then you can learn all about how to be more profitable, more efficient, and better through Landlordology and through webinars like this. I mean, we're here. We're here to give you the tools and teach you how to do it. So let me tell you a quick story. This is the Matterhorn. If you've ever seen this, it's an impressive mountain. It's in Switzerland. I recently, about a month and a half ago now, I had a tenant or an applicant who was applying to one of my places, and she came and she saw the place and said, "It's fantastic. I really need to get my roommates to apply like tonight, otherwise I might miss it." And so she was the only one that attended, but she ended up, um, texting or emailing her roommates, one of which who was hiking the Matterhorn, which is in Switzerland at the time, and got the email and said, "Oh, I better jump on it." So she's hiking the Matterhorn, and she decided to apply to our rental property. That's the power of Cozy. They can literally apply to your rental property and your listing while hiking the Matterhorn, and it's that simple. And when she did that, I had her credit report and background check that came along with it. I mean, it was really easy. So awesome. This is one of our customers. He is a landlord in San Diego, and he sent us this picture because he sent us this picture, and the subject line on the email was literally like, I'm literally collecting rent right now. And it was just a fun concept. He's out surfing, his money's being deposited, he doesn't have to chase down the rent, he's using Cozy, and he just wanted us to know. So I like to share that picture because it's a cool picture, but that's also the power of Cozy. You really don't have to think about rent. You can completely forget about it, set it up, you're good to go. And then the education part, again, Landlordology, you're probably familiar with it because you're here because you probably signed up on the site. But check it out. There's really a ton of material in there, including our more popular sections, the state law and regulations, which are in the lower left-hand corner or on the upper right where it says state laws. So check those out. You'll learn all about what your requirements are for being a landlord in your state. Again, there are county laws too, usually, but at least you'll know your state, and you'll have a link back to the actual statute where we're getting this information, so you know we didn't make it up. That's what everyone else doesn't do, is they don't actually tell you where they got it. They just say, "Oh, it's a 5-day grace period," and you have no idea how old that information is or if things have changed. So not with us. So where are we now, right? I mean, we started 3 years ago, but now we have about 55,000 property managers across the country using Cozy to manage their business and save a ton of time and money every single month. I mean, not only is it making their lives easier, but the tenants that they have, I mean, they love it. I mean, I have a house that just moved out, or is actually getting ready to on the 30th. They're moving out, and they were asking me if I knew any other landlords who were using Cozy. And I said, well, I do. I know a lot of people. And they said, well, anybody around here? And I said, well, yeah, but I don't know if they have any vacancies. And essentially what they were getting at is they wanted to find another rental property that with a landlord using Cozy because they loved the software so much. They loved the ability to pay rent without having to think about it. So I had never heard of that, where the software that a landlord was using was actually the reason a tenant would seek you out. But they were serious. So they did their best to try to find one. I don't know if they did, but that was their mission. So maybe, Cozy, if you keep it, you might have a higher retention rate if you use Cozy. I know I have. So anyway, we're in about 10,000 zip codes, which basically means we're used in every single major city. Anything that can call itself a city, I'm sure there's a property there that's being managed by Cozy or managed with the software. Lately, most recently, we actually launched a partnership with the National Association of Realtors. So we're backed by Google, we're supported and backed by the National Association of Realtors. Basically, we are providing their site doorsteps.com, and then also soon to be realtor.com, providing their rental listings there. So usually people take it the other way around, but we're actually giving them rental listings and providing them with a way for applicants to apply right there on that site. So Cozy's basically running the back end of doorstep.com when it comes to online applications. And you can go check it out. It's doorstep.com. It's also going to be realtor.com soon. Okay, so most recently, I just want to point this out. We're super excited about our most recent partnerships. We have two association partnerships, which they're just fantastic. So if you live in New Mexico or if you're in the Sacramento Valley, which is in California, check out RHA.org for Sacramento, or the Apartment Association in New Mexico. They have anywhere from 45,000 to 80,000 units, which are doors, if you call it doors. But they're just fantastic associations, and they support Cozy. They promote Cozy. They love Cozy, and we have their support. So we're not just a small company. We're something that industry leaders are coming to us asking for us to be a part of them, and they're supporting us, and we're also supporting. They're supporting us. We're supporting them. It's a great relationship. So check them out. If you live in those areas, go check them out. Their memberships are awesome. You get a lot out of it. So now let's move on to the meat and potatoes. So if you're a vegetarian, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say meat and potatoes, but that's I grew up with meat and potatoes, and that means something to me. But let's go on to the questions. So that's why you're here. That's why I'm here. Let's talk about your Q&A or your questions. I'll answer them. Again, how this works, if you missed it, how this works is you can type your questions into the question box on the right-hand side of your screen. Just look to the right, and you'll see that box. We will answer them in the order that they're received. Maggie, our customer success manager, will be reading me or feeding me the questions and kind of moderating, and I'll do my best to answer it. Again, I am not a lawyer, nor is this legal advice, so please consult with an attorney if it's a legal question. And we also have a bunch of questions that were asked during registration. So when you registered, if you asked a question, we have those. If you asked it in the last hour or hour and 15 minutes or so, please know that we didn't get those. So go ahead and put those in your put that in the Q&A. So without further ado, Maggie, would you like to go ahead and start feeding some questions? And what we're going to do, actually, before you start, what we're going to do is we're going to say your first name, where you're from, if we know it, and then ask the question. So please know we're not going to say your last name. And if we miss a question, please forgive us. You can always email me later. And if I misunderstood, then please clarify. Go ahead and type in your clarification into the Q&A. So let's get started. Thanks, guys.
All right, here's a question from Rod in Florida. He has a question about if on renewal the tenants no longer meet the requirements, either income or credit based. So they've lived there for a year, but now it's the second year and they don't meet the requirements.
Okay, good question. So what he's saying is you have tenants who passed the requirements for screening when they moved in, but now it's renewal time and you're not sure, or they definitely don't pass, and you're not sure if you want to rent to them again or what should you do. Great question. So it really depends on how that's been. So look at the past performance of the last year. That speaks so much more than their credit score. I mean, everyone falls on hard times from time to time. And so if the credit score drop is below your criteria, or if they have a lot more debt than they originally did, take that into consideration. But if they paid their rent on time, always, and never complained, always kept the house up, there's no real issues, then they're a great tenant. I mean, who cares if their credit report dropped a little bit? Credit score dropped a little bit. As long as they're doing anything illegal, we've all heard of the meth lab stories and all that kind of stuff. Then that kind of stuff's just a no-brainer. But look at their past performance. So you're under no obligation to renew to them unless that is guaranteed in your lease. So you have an opportunity to set your requirements if you want to keep them in there without under past performance. That's fine. I lived in a apartment complex that I had to pass the screening test every single year, and it was kind of pointless because I was a great tenant and I always paid my rent on time. So, and I kept the place nice. So that, to me, that's more important. I know if you're running a large apartment complex, then sometimes you need those extra standards just to keep things running. But I don't see a lot of value in rescreening or pulling credit again. Anyway, okay, that's the answer. Thanks.
All right, here's a question from Jackie about your pet policy, Lucas. Do you allow tenants to have pets? How do you handle pet refundable deposits, like a monthly fee? What's your approach?
Okay. Yeah, I do sometimes. I never allow them to have cats. Cats is just a thing that's my line. I don't allow cats. The reason that I don't allow cats is because they are self-cleaning. You can never actually get fully clean if you're self-cleaning, if you lick yourself clean. But no, it's really because nationwide, I've seen multiple statistics from multiple sources saying that more people have allergies to cats than any other animal. So cats shed traditionally more. I know that they clean themselves, uh, but no, it's just a cat thing. It's for me, and I don't want to deal with having to deal with that, someone with allergies next, for the next tenant. So what I do say is by keeping it cat free, I always can say in my rental ads that dogs are allowed or dogs have been there, but never any cats. And you would be amazed at how many tenants say that's really good because I'm allergic to cats. So no cats, but yeah, I do allow pets if they ask. It's certainly case by case. I never get into a situation where I allow a dog or another animal for one tenant and not the other if they're applying for the same place. I mean, you have to set the same criteria when you're trying to rent something. But per property, I do change it up a bit. And I never take a pet deposit. I know that sounds crazy, but never, ever, ever do I take a pet deposit because the pet deposits are unique in the fact that you have to use it for generally, you have to use it for pet damages, right? But what happens if they don't pay their rent that last month and then you end up using their full security deposit for their rent, but they also do $600 worth of damage, but it wasn't the pet, right? Then you're stuck like, do I reimburse the pet policy? When they get their lawyer involved, is there these issues? Like, what's the judge going to say? It just complicates it. In most states, you can collect more than 1 month's rent or more than 1 month's security deposit. So if there is a pet, I suggest you take 1.5 times or even 2 times the rent amount in a general security deposit, which is fully refundable minus damages, and that's what you use for any damages that a pet causes or that the person causes. If you wanted to charge a pet fee, that's okay too. That's very common where you have a monthly pet fee that doesn't go towards any deposit, doesn't go towards any damages. They may pay $50 a month to have a dog at the place, but that is strictly an admission price, right? That is strictly like to get in the door, to get that dog in the door, they have to pay $40 or $50 a month. And they often complain sometimes if they did, they paid you $600 by the end of the year, and then there's $600 worth of damage. They say, well, you collected that fee the whole year. And it's like, well, no, that's a fee, not a deposit, right? So it's very clear if you do it that way, and that's my suggestion. That was a long-winded answer, but I hope that helps.
All right, here's a question from Karen in Massachusetts. She asks, what are your suggestions for attracting more potential renters if you have about 50% vacancy and they've tried reducing rent, including utilities, paid rewards? Are there any other tips for attracting good tenants?
Okay, 50% vacancy. That is tough. I'm sorry. 50% vacancy is rough. That means if you tried reducing rent, that means the only other options are the location is not attractive. It may not mean that your property is unattractive. It may mean that just it's a bad location. And there's not much you can do about that other than continue to make your property better. And then the other thing that might be causing the problem is if your screening requirements are too high. I hate to say that, but there's this like thin line between between a bad tenant, what's better, a bad tenant or no rent. And hopefully you never have a bad tenant, but I think there's things you might be able to do to help you with the screening. If you've got a lot of people who aren't passing your requirements, then maybe you could reduce the credit score requirement or maybe some of the other things. Or, maybe there's no credit requirement at all to help you find better or help you find tenants and just start getting the rent in the door. And then what you can do is take a higher deposit, and that way maybe they'll put up some more money if they can get in the door, and that way you have a bigger deposit against any potential damages that they do. You certainly don't want to rent to anybody who's got an eviction record or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, maybe there's things you can do just to make it easier. I know that you sounds like you're trying. The other thing you could try is just really work on your marketing. So I've spent years refining my listings and taking really great pictures of the properties. And so you wanna go for the people who are going to respond to those. I mean, be the type of place that is going to attract a quality tenant. And it sounds like you're really trying. So keep it up. I mean, hire a professional photographer if you haven't already done that, and spend some time on the copy, of all the listings. I know this is another. Here's another idea. It might sound a little crazy, but if you can get a high quality set of photos for all your units that are vacant, and then make the place look really good, like it's probably going to look great now in the spring and summer because the flowers are out and everything. Try raising the rent. That is a technique that sounds awkward and weird, but it sometimes works because you'll get a tenant who thinks like, oh, it must be worth more, and I'm willing to pay $2,000 a month or whatever it is. And I found that the tenants who typically pay between $500 and $800 a month we always have problems with them. But the tenants who are willing to pay $2,000 a month, those are the ones that always pay on time. Those are the ones that upkeep the property. Those are the people that just bring a higher caliber of quality to life at the complex. So that's what I would do. I'm sorry you're having such a vacancy problem. That is rough, but it will get better. Just keep plugging away. Thanks.
Here is a question from Mark in Nevada. Where is Cozy earning its money?
Oh, yes, great question. So I did say that Cozy is 100% free, and that's usually the second answer, or second question that people ask is like, well, how do you make money? Great question, Mark. So Cozy makes money two ways. First, we do charge the tenants for credit reports and background checks. If you, as the property manager, decide you want to screen those tenants, they will pay for it. It's very simple. I mean, it's $39, $39.95 for the bundle, and it's $25 or $24.99 for each individual one if you just wanted one and not both of them. So we do make money on that. Part of that report goes to the Experian and the credit provider. The other part of it goes to us. So that we do make money on that. And then the other part is we do allow tenants to pay with a credit card if they want to, and there is a small fee that they pay. It's 2.75%. Like the ridiculous majority amount of that goes to Visa and MasterCard and American Express, but a small fraction of it we keep just to keep things running. So that is our primary revenue source. Landlords can opt to speed up their payments if they want their rent money faster, and that is $2.99 per unit, per door. You could have a limited number of payments, so there's no real transaction fee, but it's just $2.99 to turn it on for one of your properties. So that's it. That's how we make money, and it's working well for us. So you could be a property manager and landlord and never, use Cozy to its full extent and never pay a dime.
All right, here's a question from Al in Hawaii. Jealous. That's
nice.
Like a great place to live. What are the 10 or multiple best/fastest ways to evict a tenant who is delinquent on their rental payments without going to court?
That sounds like a whole blog post, actually. So I'll tell you the easiest way, the thing that has worked the best, and is also the hardest pill to swallow, is do something called cash for keys. So what that means is you approach the tenant and say, listen, I know you're behind, I'm going to take you to court, you're going to get evicted, and you'll have, I'm going to take it to a credit agency or a credit reporting company, and then your credit's going to be completely damaged. And then I'm going to file for a garnishment on your wages and tax refunds and all that stuff. And so, if you go to your tenant and you say, this is the road we're going down, and I will eventually win, and it will be embarrassing for you because your employer is going to know that you have an overdue debt that's being siphoned off your paycheck. That kind of stuff. If you just politely give him the framework and say, this is the reality. But if you're out by Friday and you keep the place clean, if you legitimately get out and you don't damage anything, I'll give you $500 cash, right? That's called cash for keys, where you say, leave by Friday and I'll give you $500. But I'm going to come here, I'm going to do the move out inspection, I'm going to make sure that the place is good and there's no damages, and then I'll give you $500. Or whatever amount. I've seen people offer thousands of dollars because they don't want to go through court, and it's worth it to them. But if someone is being evicted, it probably means they don't have the money to pay rent. They're struggling. Maybe they lost their job. Maybe they don't know what to do. And $500 or $1,000 would make a difference. It would give them the deposit money to get into their next place, and then they're gone. I've I've actually received hate mail for responses like that. Cash for keys is just a reality in our world, but people say you should always take them through eviction court so the next landlord doesn't get screwed over. And I do morally agree with that, but in the heat of the moment, when you're losing $2,000 a month on rent and you got somebody in there who's not going to budge, I'm sorry, I got to put food on the table, so I'm going to do what I need to do. The next landlord should really call me, do the landlord reference checks, and I'll let you know. Okay, so that's the easiest way. There's a couple more ways, but I can't spend too much time on it. We have a lot of questions here, so thank you, Mark. And by the way, I'm going to be in Hawaii or in Maui in October at the NARPM National Convention. I'm actually speaking there, and Cozy will be there with, and Maggie will be there, and we'll be there. So if you're in Maui in October, come visit the NARPM convention and let's meet. Thanks, Maggie.
Welcome. All right, here's a question from Dean in Washington. What method do you find best for collecting rents from tenants? Deposit at bank, electronic transfers, bring by the office, etc.
Yeah, exactly. The only way that I collect rent now is through automated rent payments, specifically through Cozy. So a lot of tools have online rent payments, but I use Cozy for screening, for keeping track of the accounting, for rent payments. So it's all nice and bundled together. But I think online rent payments is the only way you should really go. I actually have a presentation. You can go check out our YouTube channel. There's a presentation where we review about 25 different methods of collecting rent, including lock boxes and drop boxes and checks and certified checks and cash and other weird things like paying rent with chickens. I mean, that's a real thing, or labor, stuff like that. So I think they all have pros and cons. They certainly do. But hands down, the one that is the most effective is online rent payments, where you mandate in the lease that the tenant must pay you via the method that you're specifying. For me, it's Cozy. And you tell them, in the lease, it has to be an automated recurring payment. So they go in, they set it up and say, I want rent to be paid on the first every month, and then Cozy just does it. It just comes out, and then a few days later, it shows up in my account. So it's really that simple. If something were to happen where there's no money in their account, when Cozy tries to withdraw it, Cozy knows instantly. Like maybe within an hour. It's very quick. So if you were to take a check somewhere and it bounces, it takes about 7 to 10 days to really figure that out. But with Cozy, it's almost instant. So I actually had an issue once, just 2 or 3 months ago with one of our properties, where I got an email. I woke up, I got an email like around 7 or 8 in the morning. It said, Brian's payment bounced. Basically, there was no money there, and it was from Cozy. And then Brian also got the same one. And by the time I actually eaten lunch, got my daughter off, or eaten breakfast, and got my daughter off to school, I logged into Cozy to see what was going on. And Brian had already logged in by 9 in the morning and remedied the problem. So there was a problem. By 9 in the morning, it was fixed, and his payment was now processing. So I guess he transferred money, or he changed the account or something. So that's the beauty of doing online rent payment. You just don't have late rent anymore. To be honest, I haven't had a late rent payment in over 2 years. I mean, maybe going on 3 years now since I started using Cozy. So it just is really seamless. Everything else is just second best, in my opinion. There's a necessity for it. If you have an apartment building, perhaps, like sometimes tenants will actually expect that and want that, to be able to drop it off in person. But I just think it's more labor for you and more time consuming. It's harder to track. You can track offline payments in Cozy very easily, but I don't want to deal with checks anymore. So that's my answer. Thanks.
Here's a question kind of related to that from Lisa. If you already have a lease and you want to go to automated payments, do you ask your tenants to sign an amendment or amend them for the new mandate, or how do you handle the transition?
Maggie, say that again one more time for me.
If you have a lease or tenants already and you want them to use automated rent collection, what do you suggest for
I see.
bringing them
Yes.
onto the system?
So if your lease actually says that they can pay by check or cash or whatever the method is, then you have to stick with that. I mean, apart from creating an addendum, which you can certainly do. So you can create up something that they sign saying you're changing the lease, and if they agree to it, great. But what I've found is when I was first transitioning, I thought, oh, my tenants are going to hate it. They really want to. They really want to keep doing what they're doing. And to my surprise, and I shouldn't have actually been surprised because it makes sense, but they were super excited to pay online when they realized, oh my gosh, I can finally throw away my checkbook because the only check I write every month is rent. Um, they jumped all over it. So I had no problem transitioning. I don't even think in most cases you won't have to alter the lease. I think you can just let that lease carry on through until it expires, but give them the option and just say, would you like to do this? So they will probably say yes. Um, I know a bunch of apartment complexes that property managers with 300 or 400 units. They actually started implementing a rule where it said, we're not going to prohibit you from paying in person or by check or by cash or by Dropbox, but if you want to, we're going to charge a $20 handling fee to your account. And overnight, I mean, practically overnight, they're like 70 to 80% of their uh, tenants switched over to online payments. I mean, it was awesome, and they didn't lose any money at all. It was all that was the free thing, so you could do that too. Thanks.
Here's a question from Jeff in California. He writes, his units are 20% under market value. What's the best way to raise rent? Regards to number of units, timing, and also communicate that.
Yeah, that is a great question. So when's the best time to raise the rent? In my opinion, the best time is always between tenants. So when tenants move out and you've got a new set coming in. So you would just advertise the listing at a much higher rate than what you had previously listed it for or previously rented it for. And don't go outside of your limit. I mean, don't go too high to where you're not going to find any tenants, but test the market, see what's out there and do some comparables. That's my suggestion. That is the path of least resistance. But if you need money now, right, then you can only really change any leases that are renewing or month-to-month leases. So anything that's in a fixed-term lease that isn't renewing yet, you can't touch it. I mean, that's a fixed term and fixed price. But month-to-month, you can change every month. You just need to give, most of the time, 30 days notice of the rent increase. And make sure you realize what your state laws say about how much you can actually increase it. Many times it's just 5% or 3%, but sometimes there's no limit and 10% would be okay. Kind of extreme, but they'll probably argue it, but I've seen it go through. So anyway, that's between leases is when I recommend it. And many times I will not renew a lease, or I will not increase the rent on a tenant who is renewing as a thank you for renewing if they're a good tenant. And then I'll just make up the difference when they finally do leave, and I'll raise it 10% or 20% later and make back all that cash. Hope that made sense. Thank you.
Here's a question from Christine in California. What are your suggestions on, as a property manager, you're working with a lot of vendors who come by, different service people. What's a way that you can make sure that as a property manager on site that you stay safe, especially if you're alone in these situations and working with a lot of different vendors and contractors?
Yeah. If you're the sole property manager or the person in charge of meeting with these vendors and contractors, you'd have to take general precautions. So do it during the day, do it when it's daytime outside. If you have security cameras around the complex, make sure that you kind of stay within sight of those cameras. If you are concerned, then it wouldn't hurt to carry a can of mace on your keychain. They're $10 and you can get them at any sporting goods stores. And just keep it on you. You'd be surprised what a little mace will do. And one suggestion is if you are going into units that are unoccupied, or the tenants are just not home to fix something with a contractor, and there's only one contractor, or maybe there's two or three, just leave the door open always, and make sure that if there's somebody else that you that is working there, but maybe they can't leave the desk or something, make sure that they know where you are and know where you're going. And if you don't come back, that they're checking on you. So that kind of stuff. Make sure you always have your phone on you. I mean, that too. Those are my top suggestions. I'm sure that depending on how your layout is and where the units are, there's probably more things you can do. But generally speaking, also look at your contractors. That will do probably more than anything else. Make sure that you hire people that are licensed, bonded, and insured. It doesn't guarantee their morality or their character, but if they have a license and a reputation to upkeep, then they certainly don't want to get caught doing something horrible. So good luck, and I hope hope that gets better. If you can, make sure that you get somebody to come with you. I mean, that would be ideal, I guess, to have preferably somebody very big to walk around with you too. Good question.
Here's a question from Melanie in Maryland. How do you get the tenant to actually really read the lease? It seems like they sign it via smartphone, but do not read it.
Yeah, that's common. That is very common, especially with digital signing tools, which I love. It makes it super easy to sign a lease. But what I like to do is if I can, if they're local and I have the time, right, I will take them out to coffee. If you don't have a leasing office, then Starbucks becomes your office, really. Take them out to coffee. Say, hey, listen, I'm super excited you're moving in. This is great. I'd love to take you out to coffee and review the lease. And, while you're there, you can sign it. But that gives them a chance to go through with you. And it's weird and awkward at first, but, literally go through the lease line by line and just explain what each of the sections mean. And that way they can't claim that they didn't hear you and didn't understand. And they will actually be surprised how many questions they have. So that's what I would do if you are a small landlord and you have the time. If you are a large landlord and you are an apartment manager and you're crazy busy, that's more difficult. But I would still say at least have them come to your office and review the lease with you if you don't think that they're actually paying attention. On the flip side is they're adults. They need to own up to their own decisions. So, just because they would say, I didn't read the lease or I didn't know that was in there, like that's not going to hold up in court. So, you don't really have anything to worry about. It's just better if they know what's in it and nothing is a surprise later on. Yeah. Thanks.
Here's a question from, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, Hilde in Wisconsin. How do you determine what is a reasonable rent?
Yeah. How do you figure out how to price your rental? That also could be another in-depth blog post. But yeah, I think that depending on your city, where you live, there's going to be different tools. My favorite, because I live near Washington, D.C., it's a major city with a hot rental market, is still Craigslist. Craigslist isn't always the best source for me to find tenants, but it's definitely a good place for me to look up the rental prices. So I'll go find something that's similar in my area and just see what it's renting for. That doesn't mean they're getting the price they're asking for, but it gives me a ballpark. And I really only have to do that once or twice for for a new rental that I have. After that, I kind of have a feeling about it, and I can go kind of gauge the market by the amount of interest I get. So if I put up a listing and I get like 6 or 7 responses in one day, that means it's a hot market, but it also means I price it too low. I think that what you can do is my gauge. This is just for me. I want about 5 quality inquiries within about 3 days, and then I want to get them in the door to show them the place, and then talk about an application. Within 4 or 5 days after I first list it. So that's how I know it's priced about right, because some people are passing because it's a little too expensive, but there are some people who are interested. So that's what I would do. If you're not getting any responses from a listing, then then it's way too high. You know, you either got to take better pictures, make a better listing, or lower the price. Um, yeah, I think that's it. So the other thing you can do, and I've actually done this before, is create a fake listing on Craigslist or through Cozy. You can do a listing or through Zillow or something, and just make a fake one. Don't respond to a single inquiry at all. Just let them roll in and just see what you get. The other thing you can do is uh, you can price it higher depending on the season. So I think that May, June, and July, June 1st particularly is the best time to find, or best time for a lease to start. So April and May really is when I'm seeing the peak prices and the most interest and the hottest market. So uh, I can get more in June than I can in December, and that's just a fact. So even the price will change depending on the season. Very good question. Thank you.
Here's a question from Connie. Sounds like it's a pretty crummy situation. She
No.
writes that she rented to someone who's turned out to be very hostile and is moving out a month early, did not collect a security deposit. The renter will not respond to an inspection, and she owes $400 in water bills. She went over there with the water bill, and the tenant threatened to call the police. Very hostile.
Yeah.
How would you approach this?
Yeah, you know, when someone gets behind on rent and they're desperate for money, they do get pretty hostile about anything. It's don't get offended. It's not you. You know, you're at this point in the stage, you know, you're not doing anything wrong. You're just the big bad landlord that wants to take away their house and take away their money, right? I mean, so it's not you, it's just your role. And I think that in that situation, what I would do is I would look up my statute for my state, you know, what the law is on the amount of notice that I have to give, and you can look that up on Landlordology. The amount of notice I have to give to enter the property. It can be for anything, like for repairs and for you know, doing inspection, and give that proper notice and make sure that they understand I'm giving proper notice. You know, if you really want to be official, you give it by certified mail, so that you have a receipt of it, and or you could just do it in an email if you think they'll get it. But give proper notice, and then that gives you the right to enter the property, regardless of if they don't want you to. Now, if they're going to hit you or if they're going to physically abuse you for entering, then you need to call the police. But yeah, you can enter the property, and then you can perform the business that you have there, and then, you know, if they're there, maybe you could talk to them. If not, maybe you don't want to talk to them if they're hostile. But yeah, I mean, just basically pursue this. If they're behind and they're not paying their rent, then you need to file the eviction as soon as possible, within your notice requirement. So it sounds like you probably already met that. Sometimes you have to wait 5 days or so after the rent is actually due. But if they're moving out already and you think they're going to be gone very soon, then maybe the eviction is not worth your time if you think they're actually going to leave. Because you didn't take a deposit, there's not much you can do in terms of immediate solutions to refunding you. I mean, you're going to have to pay that water bill. Unfortunately, this is just a side note, but unfortunately, across the country, the landlord or the property owner is always responsible for the water, because water is an essential utility, and the water company will put a lien on your house. They're one of the few utilities that can actually do that. They can put a lien on your house if the tenant doesn't pay the water bill. It's totally rotten, but that's just the way it is. So make sure that water bill gets paid, and get that tenant out of there. Get a new tenant in there as quickly as you can, and then consider going to small claims court and filing that case against the tenant once they're out, you know, so they can no longer hold your place hostage. So I hope that helps. That's a rotten situation. I'm sorry to hear it, but I hope that gives you some direction.
Here's a question from Tanya. What is the best way to renew leases for a multi-unit building? All the leases are overdue and they lapse into month to month. So it sounds like you need to go back to a yearly term, and then also they're interested in raising the rent.
Okay. So it sounds like the question is, what's the best way to renew leases? And then what's best way to raise the rent? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, cool. Thanks. If that's not right, feel free to correct us in the question and answer box. But yeah, so best way to renew leases. Um, this is completely just whatever your preference is. And so I'll give you some options. You have to decide what's right for you. Many landlords will like to auto renew. Now that's where in your lease you actually say this lease will renew for the same period of time. So if it's a year lease, come the end of it, it's just going to automatically roll over. That's called the year to year periodic lease, and and that's fine. What I don't like about that is that I have to remember to terminate it if I want to. So I don't always want to just miss. I don't want to miss the window of notice period. So sometimes with a year-to-year lease, you gotta give a certain amount of notice. If it's going to automatically renew, you have to give notice that maybe you don't want it to renew. I'd rather have it the other way around. So what I do is I never have any leases that automatically renew because I certainly want the option to increase the rent amount. And what that does is I basically hold the lease as hostage. I tell because it's not renewing, it has an end date. If they want to stay there, which I hope they will if they're good tenants, and I'll tell them, we need to renegotiate the lease. Are you willing to stay another 12 months? Are you okay with this price? And we talk about it. And if they aren't, they have an opportunity to leave. But if they want to, then that's great. We figure it out, and we either sign an addendum, which is real easy. It's just a one pager that you write up with what it is that you're agreeing to, and then you can even keep the original lease that you have, and just that addendum will renew it. I don't like month-to-month leases. I never do month-to-month. At best I do really 2 month to 2 month. So it's kind of like a month-to-month, but it requires 60 days notice to terminate. So that I will do that if I have somebody for a short period of time, and I only do 60 days notice because I think to find a quality tenant, you need to start looking 45 to 60 days beforehand. And that's when the good tenants are looking for properties because they plan ahead, right? They are making a lot of money or more money than the ones that don't. They're not reacting. They're proactive to their life, and they're planning ahead, and they're looking for a place to move. So that's the amount of time I need to find good tenants. And I usually find quality tenants like 4 weeks before the lease is up of the previous tenant. So that's what I do. I don't believe in auto renews, but some people love month-to-month tenants, and they love the ability to just terminate whenever they want. If you have a deadline of some sort, like you have a house or a unit that you're selling, then it would be wise to maybe do month-to-month or maybe a very short lease. You don't necessarily have to do a year. But years are my favorite, maybe even 2 sometimes. But I like year leases. It's just right. Thanks. Oh,
Here's
and
a question
yeah,
from
sorry, the
Darlene.
rent increase question. I think I answered that in the
Oh,
last
yeah.
one. That's why I skipped over it. But yeah, I hope I answered it before. If I didn't, please, tell me more specifically what you're asking for. Okay, go ahead, Maggie. Thanks.
Sure. Question from Darlene. If she sends a letter to a tenant telling them they must move out on or before the end of their lease, and the tenant moves out 1 month before their lease end date, can she collect for that remaining month?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the lease is what matters. So if they've agreed to pay for that last month in the lease, because that's when the date of the lease ends, they still have to pay it. It doesn't matter if they live there. I mean, I had a tenant who rented a place for me for a year, and he was a neurosurgeon at Berkeley in California, and he would come into town and just visit Capitol Hill, and he would stay at my place for 2 nights a month, and he paid his rent in full. I mean, granted, he had a lot of money, but he paid his rent in full. It didn't matter how much time he spent there. It didn't matter if he stopped coming, and I actually think he did stop coming like 3 months prior to the end of his lease, but he paid his rent. So it's a contract. Doesn't matter if they actually live there or not. It's a contract and an agreement to pay rent to occupy. It doesn't matter if they actually occupied it or not. That's a great question. Thank you.
Here's a question from May. Her tenants recently asked if they could install insulation in the attic, or for the landlords to install the insulation in the attic for them, are they obligated to do that for their tenants?
No, no. So the obligations that a landlord has to a tenant is to provide a inhabitable dwelling. So assuming that the insulation that the house is not like uninhabitable because of the temperature, assuming that it doesn't actually need the insulation to be inhabitable, then there's no obligation to it. It sounds like they just want to reduce their monthly utility expenses and they want you to pick up the tab. I think it's a good thing to have insulation. Don't get me wrong, but you don't have to have it unless it somehow is rendering the unit uninhabitable. So, good question. Thank you.
Here's a question from Rod. He writes, in Florida, a person can have a medical need for a service animal beyond a seeing eye dog. With an application for a rental with a service animal, would it be intrusive to demand a medical need signed by a physician to consider the request to rent?
Yeah. Is this Rod K? Is his last name?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, cool. Rod, hey, good to see you again, or hear you, or whatever. Yeah, so service animals. So this is tricky. I have heard different stories from different attorneys. So there's even some conflict about this. But if a dog is a service dog, like if they, or it doesn't have to be a dog. If you have a service donkey, that animal has passed a certification test. They have if they're actually a service animal, they have passed a test according to the state laws, and they have some sort of certification to prove it that they're able to take care of the person with the disability, or they're qualified to take care of people with blindness or hearing issues or whatever. So a real service animal will have some sort of certification. Now, there's also something called an emotional support animal, or companion animal, which is different. Those animals do not have any sort of actual certification. There's no course they have to go through and pass, so they're not going to have that paperwork. And I've heard from different attorneys that it is discrimination if you even ask what the disability is, and then I've heard from other attorneys saying that you can certainly ask, and that you can ask them to prove it. Like I don't know if I would argue with a doctor's note, right? But, I think I would feel comfortable. I may be shooting myself in the foot, but I would feel comfortable asking somebody who says they have a companion animal to just say, okay, listen, it's none of my business what your disability is or what that companion animal is serving for, but I will need some sort of medical prescription or some sort of doctor's note saying that you need this animal to live a normal life. I don't think that's out of the ordinary or out of the question. And I hope that doesn't come back to bite me. But yeah, if there's if it's an actual service dog or service animal, then they should have some paperwork. So they should have something to prove it. If it's a companion animal, talk to a lawyer. This is a good example. Talk to a lawyer in your area and see if you can ask for proof or a medical note. I would think you could, and I certainly do if that comes up. Good one, Rod. Thanks.
All right, here's a question from Tara. To summarize, it's a situation involving a family member living in her mother's home, and they aren't paying rent. They don't have a legal lease. They just kind of moved in. What can we do in that situation?
Is it a family? You said a family member living in the home? That's tricky. So really, they're a guest. If they're paying rent and there's an actual lease, then you've got a tenant situation. But if they're just a family member who's moved in and now won't move out, then they're just a stubborn guest. So if you've allowed, so here's the kicker, right? In many parts of the country, and I'm not going to give you a list of all the states, but in many parts of the country, if a person has been allowed to make a place their residence, if you have given them permission to do that, and that is their primary residence for more than 30 days, then you just can't kick them out. Does that make sense? You just can't like put them on the street because, our society and our government frowns on having people living on the sidewalk, and we don't want that, and judges don't want that, police don't want that. So there are rules saying that you really can't force somebody out. It's called a self-help eviction. It's where you take matters into your own hands, and you really can't do that. It's certainly a no-no if you actually have a tenant. Now, if it's a guest like your cousin Pookie who just won't leave, then then you need to have a hard conversation with Pookie, and you need to say, time to get a job, buddy, and you need to get off my couch. But if all is lost and the relationship is gone and they literally won't leave and it is horrible, then I suggest you file an eviction. Because if the relationship is truly torn and gone, and there's no coming back from it, then if you try to lock them out, they will probably call the police, and the police will probably force you to let them back in. So I would file an eviction, maybe even get a lawyer to write a really strong letter before you do that, and see if maybe that strong letter on attorney letterhead would get them to move out. Alternatively, you could maybe fund their exit, so you could give them enough for a security deposit to leave. So you could try that. That's cash for keys. That's all I can think of now. But yeah, don't do a self-help eviction if it has truly been their primary residence for a while. Thanks, Tara.
All right, here's a question from Dean about Cozy. How long does payment take from the tenant's account to their business account?
Yeah, great question. So it depends on how the tenant's paying. If they are paying through ACH, which is called automated clearinghouse, it's the standard for transitioning money or sending money across from bank to bank. It kind of goes through the Federal Reserve. Cozy does multiple methods of payment. So the free method is that if they pay with a bank account and it goes to your bank account, it takes 5 business days. If you want to speed that up, you can pay that $2.99 per unit that you have for unlimited transactions on that unit, and it'll be there in 3 days. If they pay with a credit card or debit card, then you'll see it sometimes in 1 day. I've seen 1 to 2 days, which is pretty cool. So, but they do have to pay a small fee. It's just a credit card fee that they have to pay that's instilled by Visa and MasterCard. So 5 days if it's free. It's 3 days if you want to pay a little extra or pay anything to get that money faster. And then it's like 1 to 2 days if they pay with a credit card. Good question.
All right, let's see. What's the best way to advertise in a low-income, high-crime area where some of the renters have limited access to the internet and yard signs tend to attract theft?
Yeah. What's the best way to attract quality tenants? Is that what the question is? Okay. Yeah, in low income or low income areas. I hate yard signs too. I hate them because all it does is it screams, this house is vacant or going to be vacant soon, so please come rob me or steal my appliances and steal my copper. So yeah, I don't like them. Some people still use them and love them, but I don't like the yard signs. I think if they don't have internet access, that's a tough one. If they don't have internet access and maybe go to employers. That's what I would try. So I would still do the internet because even if I was a low-income tenant and I didn't have a computer, and I was looking for an apartment, I would find a way to get online. I'd go to the library or I'd borrow friends or something. I would do something to get online because I know that, listings and everything's online now. So I'd figure it out. But I would go to employers. So find out what the employers are, the big employers in your area, in your town, and maybe even close to where your apartments are. And then go talk to them and say, listen, I've got some great housing over here. If you ever need places, can we advertise here? Or can we put a brochure or a flyer up, or will you recommend us, or, tell them that we'll give maybe we'll waive like a half a deposit or something, if they work for you, because, you're getting someone who's employed and you've got this nice funnel where they're sending tenants your way, or at least applicants. So, if it's a lot of, sometimes construction workers or people who have more transient jobs, that's also another great way to get to know the actual employers, and then you can say, hey, listen, Johnny just applied, would he, is he good? Does he work well? Do you have any issues with him? And you can actually talk to the employer right away. So that's what I would try. Go talk to employers. The other thing you can do is if there's hospitals nearby, or some really big attraction like an amusement park or something, you can try to market directly to that. So you could talk to the hospital and say, I'm willing to do more of a corporate style housing. I can furnish the places, or I can do nurse housing, so I can work with traveling nurses, and they'll put you on a very short list, and because all those people will be contacting the hospital to try to find housing, and they will recommend you. So that's another good thing. With the with the amusement park, I just was saying that you could try to attract people who might want to stay short term and do more like an Airbnb style place with the vacant units. That will often work well, but you also have to furnish it. So good luck. Good luck with that.
Here's a question from Andrea in Arizona. She has a rental income townhouse, and she's wondering if she should put it on an LLC. So I guess, what are your thoughts on going into a LLC versus just an independent landlord?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Should I put my rental property into an LLC, or in a corporation, or something, some business entity? And that is that's a good one. There are multiple facets of this, and most people think I'm going to put it in an LLC to protect myself, because then they can't sue me, but they could sue the LLC, and there's no assets in the LLC. Or at least, at worst, maybe if the property's in that LLC, like we discussed, then the worst you would lose is that one asset. They couldn't come after your primary. That's the gist. But there's flaws in it, and I want to say that in order to be truly bulletproof when it comes to legality and liability, you really need to put everything in that LLC, everything pertaining to that property. So if you wrote a personal guarantee, if you did a personal note and a mortgage in your name, and you bought that house, and that house is deeded to you, and or titled to you, then there's really no escaping it. So here's the catch. You could go to the records office, the county records office, and you could ask them to transfer the title to the LLC. Okay, great. So now you've got the title in the LLC. But if you still have that personal note, that will oftentimes cause a due on sale clause in your mortgage. And so now is when your mortgage finds out, and sometimes they don't, but many times they do, that they find out that your house was sold and it looks like it was sold to an LLC for $0. They will trigger a due on sale clause. So now your full mortgage becomes due. Okay, well, now you're stuck, because now you have to go back, and you either have to refinance or renegotiate it with your mortgage company, or you have to go put it back into your name. And as soon as you do, it satisfies their demands. But they want to make sure that you're personally going to be liable for that mortgage. Now, if you don't have a mortgage, then you don't have anything to worry about. But it's tricky. You really got to eliminate everything. You really got to do everything in that LLC, and it's a pain. I want to propose a different solution. It doesn't mean you shouldn't, so please talk to a lawyer, because there are advantages. What I did is I made my houses are personally guaranteed, and they're deeded to me, and they're titled to me. But my property management business is in an LLC, just because that's the operations of it, and that's who's collecting rent. So maybe consider doing that. At least it puts the appearance of a LLC between you and the tenant, even if it's not bulletproof. But at the very least, please go talk to your insurance company and see if they offer what's called an umbrella policy. Umbrella policies are awesome. They're like an umbrella, and they sit over top of all of your properties, and you can have an insurance amount up to whatever you want. Oftentimes it's $1 million or $2 million. And what that does is it says, well, the original homeowner's policy will cover up to, maybe $500,000 of liability, like if they take you to court and they sue you for a broken back because they slipped off the stairs or something, the insurance company will pay $500,000. But what happens if they have $1 million in medical debt or a judgment for that? Then that umbrella policy kicks in and says, "Oh, we'll pay the rest," And so if you have somebody who's going to cover all the circumstances and kind of cover all your properties at once, then all of a sudden it's not so scary to get sued. So if you do get sued, you're like, okay, well, we'll deal with it. And if I'm found guilty of something, then I've got this policy. So that's what I would do. And those umbrella policies are common. Every major insurance provider has them. And they're not even that expensive. I think I pay between $200 and $300 for $1 million policy. That's $200 to $300 a year. So it's really not that expensive. So check it out. They're called umbrella policies, and I would say at the very least, go get that tomorrow, and then talk to a lawyer about an LLC. Good one, thank you.
Here's a question from AGW. What is your best practice for getting payment for a renter to be delivered on a certain date rather than postmarked or in process by a certain date?
Well, I make them in the lease. I make them sign up for automatic rent payments, automatic online rent payments with Cozy. So I know that they're going to set up rent payments to get paid on a certain day every month. In Cozy, I can see what day they've scheduled it for. So rent is due by the 1st. In my state, I don't have a late fee or grace fee policy or grace period policy. There's no statute for that. So rent is due on the 1st, late on the 2nd, and then there's a daily late fee thereafter of $20 every day that they're late. So the rule is the tenant gets credited with paying rent on the day they initiate payment. So the day they either drop off a check at your office or in your hand, or they give you a wad of cash, or they start the online transaction, that's when they get credit for paying. Now, it's no relevance to them how long it takes you to actually get to the bank or how long it takes to process the money. That's between you and your bank. So how do you get them to do it, right? Well, I put it in the lease. So if they don't, I know long before the 1st that they haven't, because I can see in Cozy what day they are scheduling it for, like the 4th or the 5th or whatever, and then I can talk to them about it and say it's a lease violation. But yeah, I don't have that problem because I use online rent payments. And in terms of postmark, if you're collecting rent checks via the mail, then you just need to make it very, very clear that, listen, postmark doesn't work. That may work for the IRS when you're paying your taxes, but rent needs to be here by the 1st. It needs to be in my hands. So whether you drive it over or put it in the mail, it needs to be in my hands by the 1st. And if it's not, you need to enforce your late fees. And those late fees will cause them to get their act in gear. Good one, thanks.
Here's a question from Jean in Tennessee. What are some cost-effective upgrades in a mid-grade rental unit?
Ooh, cost-effective upgrades. Okay, so I recently put in Formica countertops that look like granite in one of my short-term rental properties, and it turned out beautifully. Like, I'm a huge fan of granite. I love marble countertops and granite countertops, but they are super expensive. I have them in a lot of properties, but on this one, I was like, you know what? I can't do it right now, so I'm just gonna buy like a 8-foot slab at Home Depot, and I'm just gonna put it in. Well, that 8-foot slab's like $200, right? It's awesome. And so you can get these Formica countertops that look like granite, and the tenant won't actually really care. I mean, it looks good. That's oftentimes all they care about. They want to impress their friends. They want it to look good in pictures. And the beauty is it looks phenomenal in pictures. It really looks awesome. So all the pictures will look like granite, but you're not falsely advertising. You're not actually saying there's granite. It's just granite looking. So that's one thing I would do. Also, put in stainless appliances. I know that is silly, but that is a checklist, a weird checklist that a lot of tenants have. And stainless appliances sometimes are double what regular, really cheap appliances are, but you can get a good deal on them sometimes. And go looking around for like warehouse sales I've got a couple near me, kind of in Baltimore, and sometimes they'll do auctions, and they have like $2,000 stainless fridges for $800, right? And I'd spend $800 anyway, so why not get a stainless? So you just got to be creative that way. Other things you could do, I wouldn't spend a lot of money on carpet, but I would, if you are going to put carpet down, don't get the really plush kind, or don't get anything that's going to wear really easily. Go ahead and get the short-haired carpet. I don't know what it's called, but not even Berber, but um, something that will handle a lot of traction, because it'll look nice, it'll stay clean, it'll be easy to vacuum, and it will last a long time, longer than most regular standard cut carpets. So I'd go for that. So off the top of my head, those are 3 things that you could try.
Here's a question from Abby. How do you recommend collecting for utilities like water? Should you bill them separately or include them in the monthly rent?
Sure. Personally, I very much dislike the idea of managing the utilities myself and then having the full management. I mean, like, I get the bill, I have to pay it, and then I go and I collect that amount from the tenant. I don't like that because it's a lot of admin work. So I'm all about trying to make landlording easy, and so I can go surfing while my rent collection is coming in. Although I will preface this, I've never been surfing, so it's something I'm going to try when I go to the NARPM convention in October. But I will say what you oh shoot, I forgot. I'm trying to thought there. I was talking about, what was the question again?
Sorry, 1 second. I clicked away from it.
Sorry about that.
Collecting utilities from separately versus including them in a fee.
Right. So sorry. It's these questions are all blurring. So okay. So yeah, what I prefer are one of 2 ways. One, get the tenants to manage it themselves. They're adults. They can do it themselves. They really, really can. Even if they're 23 years old, they can do it themselves. So they're paying their cell phones by themselves. So they're paying that bill. They can handle a few more utilities. Even for water, which the city will require your name to be on that bill, they will always send a copy to a tenant if you ask them to. They realize that that's a great way for them to get paid, so they will send a copy to the tenant under the tenant's name, and therefore the tenant doesn't actually know that your name's on it still, but the tenant will just pay it. So that's something you can do, and almost all utilities will let you put in the tenant's name. I can't think of anyone that doesn't. So do that. If you must manage it, the easy way to do it is to come up with some fixed flat fee. So don't worry about what the actual cost is. Just make sure the bills get paid, and then figure out what the average is, and then even fluff it if you want to, for come up with a fee that's reasonable for all these utilities on average, and just say, listen, there's a utility fee of $300 every single month, and that includes all essential utilities, and we're just going to add it to your rent, and that's it. And you need to negotiate that up front before the lease gets signed, but that's one way you can handle it. That way you don't ever have to talk to the tenants about utilities. You just pay it. You're going to get a reasonable amount that's going to cover your costs. Those are the 2 methods I suggest.
Here's a couple questions from Portia in North Carolina.
Okay.
Her situation is, it sounds like she's managing rentals from out of state.
Okay.
So a couple different facets to the question. One is managing contractors who are in a different state, showing properties when you're in a different state. Do you hire a realtor? How do you encourage your tenants to maintain the property? Whether it's you provide them landscaping, or do you kind of enforce them to do it themselves? So
the general question is, how do you manage a property from out of state? That's tricky. If it's a long-term lease, like a year lease or more, you can certainly work it out with the tenants. So once you find tenants, you can just negotiate with them and say, listen, this is how it's going to work. If there's something wrong, call me. I'll call a plumber, a local plumber, and then I'll coordinate it. And so, I'll make sure that they show up, or I'll ask them to show up, on Monday or whatever, but you need to be there. You need to let them in. They need to have access to it. And then I will pay them separately. So all the contractors I've ever really dealt with, they're okay with taking a credit card over the phone. And I don't deal with contractors that only take cash or checks. I really need a contractor who's got their business together. So I deal with reputable ones. And so they'll just take a credit card over the phone, and I'll pay them when the job's done. And I'll ask the tenant, did they do a good job? That kind of stuff. So get the tenant involved and just let them know this is how it's got to work. If you want to rent this place, you just kind of have to be around when stuff happens. But it doesn't, one thing you can do, one thing I highly recommend is make sure that you befriend either a neighbor of the property or a handyman in the area, and then give that person a key. So you could either give it to the person, or you could leave it in a lockbox that only like a very small number of people that you really do trust has access to it. So I have a handyman. It took him about 3 years to earn the right to have access to that lockbox. I needed to know I could trust him and he wasn't going to steal from my tenants and all that stuff. So, you really got to screen those guys too. But yeah, I mean, just do your best to just get the tenant involved so that the tenant is part of the maintenance. In terms of finding tenants, that's the tricky part. So if you are looking for tenants and you have to do showings from afar, that's not going to work. You certainly need somebody to be there to let them in, to see the place. And then you can do everything else through Cozy. I mean, you can do online applications. You can even do lease signing through, a variety of different tools out there like DocuSign. You can do online rent collection through Cozy. All that can be handled online, but they still want to get in and see the place. So I suggest either getting your handyman, whoever you trust, or a neighbor or something, and saying, hey, listen, I'll pay you $100 every time you do a showing, or $50, or get the tenants. So if you have current tenants, just say, listen, hey, I'll give you $25 if you, I've done this before and it works. I'll give you $25 if you show the place to a tenant, and I'll set up all the times and everything, but they'll show up, you let them in, tell them about the place, put on a good face, clean up a little bit. I'll give you $25 regardless. And if they sign a lease, I'll give you another 100. And that works amazingly well, because now the tenant is your ambassador, and he is, hopefully you have a good relationship with him or her, and they're promoting about how great the area is, and they're telling the tenants, real answers to real questions, and hopefully building you up so that this person will sign a lease. So you don't want anybody to ever lie, but that's a good way to get a good involvement with your tenant. Lastly, if you don't have any of those options, you can hire a property management company to do a la carte services. So you could call them and say, listen, I'm not interested in signing you on a retainer or paying you a monthly fee, but I am interested in having you show my unit. So you don't have to do any of the marketing, because I can make listings myself and I can post them online and I can take calls, but I need somebody to let them in the door and walk them around and tell them a little bit about the area. And then you negotiate some sort of per showing fee with that property manager, and that's it. So you can do that all kind of remotely. Great question. That is a full-blown blog post, which we've done once or twice. So good question. Let's see, Maggie, we are at about like 9:30 Eastern time. We're at 90 minutes or so already. Tell me, I mean, what are we looking like with questions? I mean, how many more are still in the hopper, and how's it going?
We've got a lot of questions, so I don't think we're going to get through all of them, so perhaps we can follow up for the ones we didn't get to by email, and maybe take another couple right now.
Okay, yeah, let's take maybe 5 more, and everyone just stick with us. Thank you for attending, and we'll take 5 more. It does look like we have a lot of questions, so way more than we could probably answer in about 3 or 4 hours. Wow, I'm honored. Thank you. We will do our best to try to get back with you on some of this via email as best we can. So thank you. Yeah, go ahead and pick about 5. And maybe if you haven't done any from the newer group that's come in over the webinar, try that.
Sure.
Do a couple.
I'm going to start with one that came from Shar in Colorado and Tanyelle from North Carolina that are very similar. Shar writes about the best way to develop a rental lease agreement, your tips there. And then Tanyelle adds, is there a limit to how many pages a lease can be? Like, what would be excessive in terms of page number?
Sure. Okay, so
Like,
I've never seen a page number limit in a statute. So I'm, it doesn't mean there isn't one, but I've looked through almost all of the statutes for almost all the states and summarized a lot of them. Again, not legal advice nor a lawyer, but no, I've never seen a statute that limits the lease. Now, from a common sense standpoint and just usability, if you're dropping 100 pages down, you're going to look ridiculous, and the tenant's going to kind of cringe and say, "This, what did I get myself into?" Which actually happened to me. I was a tenant signing a lease at a large apartment complex, and they literally put what looked like a ream of paper down in front of me, and pulled out the very last page and said, "Sign here," and then that was it. And when after I signed it, I was like, "Well, wait, are we going to go through this? What are we doing?" And oh, you can look at it at your own time. Well, then they didn't even give me a copy, so it was very bad customer service. But what I suggest is make sure you go get a lease, or at least look at lease templates that are online from reputable companies that are state specific. So if you need some examples, go to landlordology.com and click on our services directory. There's a whole legal forms section, and all of those companies are companies that we and myself have used or recommended, and we don't get any kickbacks or anything like that. We just believe in them, and they provide a good service. So check those out. It's definitely worth buying one, and just comparing to your current lease. It needs to be state specific, and it'll give you clauses that you didn't even think about, right? So give that a shot just to compare. If for nothing else, you spent 30 or $40 for your peace of mind. My lease is about 12 pages, and I've refined it over the years. I don't think it's ever been more than that, but yeah, it's about 12 pages. And one thing that I do that actually is very helpful for the tenant, and I get lots of comments on this, is the very last page before or with the signature page, really, I build a little table and a chart, and I basically just put in a summary of any possible fee, like rent, security deposit, smoking damage fee, if there's a fine for month to month if they continue on or whatever, anything else that could possibly charge the tenant, and I summarize it into one little table, and that way, at the very least, they can look at that and say, this is what the lease is summarized as, and there's no other surprises in there. They should still read it, but that's a good trick to just help the tenant adapt and understand the lease without having to read all of it in detail, so they don't feel so overwhelmed, especially if they're looking at like 10 or 12 pages. If your lease is like 4 pages, I don't want to hear it like, oh, it's simple and it's beautiful. Well, no, because I've tried the 4-page lease, and it's got holes in it like Swiss cheese. So you need something. I would say if you're anywhere below 6 or 7, maybe it's time to go look at talk to a lawyer or contact one of those legal forms websites listed on Landlordology. So give that a shot. Maggie, repeat the first one was about the term, how do you build a quality lease? Is that right? Or the clauses that are in there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Cool. So
you recommend.
yes, there are like 10. I would say there's probably like 10 or 11 clauses that I can't live without, that are just totally essential. I actually wrote a blog post on that, so I'm not going to go through it in full detail, but go check out landlordology.com and type in clauses I can't live without, to search for that, and it'll come up, and you can go through, and I actually list and show you the clauses that I have in my lease that are so essential that I would not ever think about taking them out. So go check that out. And then also check out a legal forms website, check out a quality lease that's state specific, and you'll be able to get all kinds of clauses that you never would have thought of for like $40. So give that a shot. Good one. Thank you.
All right, here's a question from Tracy about verbal agreement with a tenant who's been renting for more than 22 years.
Oh my gosh.
What are the guidelines for getting them to remove the property? And do they have more legal rights than, let's say, someone who was only living there for 3 years or a shorter period of time?
So they have a month-to-month lease, and they've been on this month-to-month lease for 20-some years. Is that right? How do you get them to leave?
It's a verbal agreement, so I'm not sure what lease is involved.
Gotcha.
If there is a lease
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, unless ownership has changed somehow, then they have just as many rights and the same amount of rights as a verbal agreement of 1 month, So the number of years doesn't necessarily give them a claim to the property. It's the agreement that gives them a claim to the property, a claim to live there. So verbal agreements are very weak. They are binding, but they're impossible to prove. So a verbal agreement is he said, she said, and no one can prove otherwise. So it's very difficult to prove in court. But if there's a verbal agreement and both parties agree on what that agreement is, then it is legally binding. So they're not bad. I think that something like rent should really be written down. So I never do verbal agreements. Um, yeah. So if you want them to leave, you would probably, and this is another thing where you would talk to a lawyer in your area, but depending on your state laws, you would probably just give them 1 month's notice. Now that sounds crazy because they've probably raised kids in that house, but 1 month's notice is the adequate amount of time in most states for a month-to-month lease, which a verbal agreement is typically considered a month-to-month or periodic lease, unless I suppose your verbal agreement was for a yearly term or something, and everybody's in agreement about that. So yeah, you really just give them the proper notice that's defined by your state laws, which you can look up on Landlordology. That's it. It's as simple as that. What's next?
All right. Any tips for owner statements? So it sounds like a property manager situation. Do you recommend monthly? Do you manage like an operating account? How do you suggest kind of setting up the
I do.
administration
Yeah.
side?
If you're managing a property on behalf of an owner, then it's just good business to keep that owner up to date. And a monthly statement is standard. That is the industry standard. Now, it doesn't mean you can't recommend or ask to do quarterly statements, but everything in the rental industry kind of operates on a monthly calendar anyway. So it just makes sense to kind of summarize your income and expenses from that property and do it monthly. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It really doesn't. I mean, if you're just managing a few properties and you've got good relationships with all these people or they're friends of yours or whatever, it could be just as simple as saying, a quick email. Or if you're tracking, some things in a spreadsheet, Cozy lets you track all the income beautifully, which is awesome. But if you're tracking other things in a spreadsheet, maybe you might want to give them access to that spreadsheet. Use Google Docs or something to do that. If you have an accounting system like QuickBooks that you're managing the rest of your business with, and you're also helping to track the property stuff with that too, you can import all of Cozy's information into QuickBooks really easily, and then you can generate reports that way too. Cozy will let you export the data, and so you could provide that. But monthly standard. Talk to your owners, see if they'd rather not be bothered. I know a lot of owners, including myself, that really want things to operate on autopilot. So really, don't contact me unless there's an expense over $50 or there's a problem. So sometimes you can do that.
Here's a question. We have time for one more?
Yeah, let's do 2 more. I think that was question number 3.
Cool. 2 more.
Make them good. No pressure.
This is from Jennifer.
Okay.
Can she charge students to pay rent for the entire school year?
Oh, good question. So that is very tempting with students because they are often paying their tuition and then housing, and any sort of food, often on a payment plan or paid with tuition up front. If it was school housing, they would have to pay for that entire semester up front. But unfortunately, universities and student housing, official student housing from the colleges, are under some different landlord-tenant laws. They're not necessarily landlords. So yes, the answer is it depends on your state laws. I know that's not a great answer, but many states have a limit to the amount of prepaid rent that you can collect. Now, prepaid rent is anything that's going to go towards paying rent, but just collect it early. And um, sorry, I didn't mean to insult you. That was a very obvious definition. Didn't mean to explain it like that. But yeah, so many times you can only collect 1 month's rent, 1 month's prepaid rent. You would be surprised how many people are collecting first and last month's rent when they actually are not allowed to, because that would be 2 months prepaid rent. But yeah, I mean, most states will let you collect at least first month's rent early, and then some will let you collect the second month. And then sometimes, if you have a year lease or something longer than 6 months, there's no limit on how much you can collect. And if you live in a state like that, which is great, then you theoretically and reasonably could demand the entire semester of rent up front. Now, I don't suggest it unless, well, for student housing, it's probably doable. I mean, they're probably getting payments from their parents. Their parents are probably paying it, or they're getting a student loan, and so it is all up front. So maybe that's okay. If it was a normal tenant, not a student, then that's just going to scare them away. They're going to go rent the house down the street instead of yours, because that's a lot of money. So good one. Yeah, that's a really good question. Student housing probably would work, but check your state laws. Okay, last question. Let's go for it.
All right, last question. Let's go into, so this is a question from Leslie in Oregon about Cozy's application form.
Okay.
She asked, if you don't have the tenant social, how would you go about setting that up? So I think just kind of going into how the application works in Cozy, and
yeah,
that you wouldn't need it.
Great question. Yes, that's awesome. So yes, Cozy actually built a name for itself off of our applications being the most secure in the industry. So one of the things that we pioneered with Experian when we helped them build their flagship product now for this is that the tenant doesn't actually give the social security number to the landlord. It's all handled through an identity verification process, and it is all very secure. So because the tenant is involved in this soft credit inquiry, the landlord doesn't run any reports. It's all just given to the landlord. It's shared with the landlord. And so the landlord doesn't have to be bothered with running reports as we used to do. Those are hard inquiries, and they will hurt the credit score of the tenant, which is just bad. But as a result, you also, the tenant doesn't need to give the social security number to the landlord. So what I suggest is just let go of that. That's a hard thing to do, but I haven't collected a social security number from an applicant, and I will say, preface this, with an applicant in years, because I've been able to get everything I would ever need through Cozy's application process. Now, there's other, all three credit bureaus have the same process now, like TransUnion and Equifax all have similar systems where you could log into their website, give an email of a tenant, and then the tenant would share, order the credit report and share it with you. It's not wrapped into a beautiful property management system like Cozy, but they all kind of mimicked what we did in a lot of ways. And the catch here, I can just see some evil stares, right? Because that's like just so faux pas. So you don't need to collect the social security number of a applicant. I really honestly sometimes will have. I had 36 applicants a month ago. It's a group house that I have it's a townhouse. Groups of 6 will apply. There's 6 bedrooms, and I had 6 groups. So I had 36 applicants. I didn't collect a single social security number. I honestly don't want 36 social security numbers that I have to keep locked up in a safe behind a closed door in my office and protect out of fear that somebody's going to break into my house, steal their identity, and now I'm going to be at fault. I don't want that responsibility, but I do want to know the social security numbers of all of my tenants. See what I did? So I don't care about the applicant. I can get all the information I need without it, including a credit report and score and everything, and background check. But I do need it for a tenant, because if that tenant leaves, then and doesn't pay rent, and I need to go after them, then I need it for credit damaging. I basically need them to give that social security number to a credit reporting agency or credit collections agency. I don't need the social security number to file an eviction. And in most cases, most core cases, there is no social security number. I mean, for everything else, violent crimes or anything, I mean, you're not going to know the social security number of the person you're pressing charges against. But I don't need it for an eviction. But I would need it to garnish their wages, file a tax collection, a tax refund collection on it, or hire a collection agency. So I make them give me the social security number when they sign the lease. It's as simple as that. So as soon as I enter into that landlord-tenant relationship, they sign the lease and they provide the social security number. That's my method, and it's worked great so far. So very good question. So I think that wraps it up. We have a decent number of questions that we did not get to, and I am so sorry, but we're not going to turn this into a 3 or 4 hour seminar. Thank you all for attending. If you have questions about Cozy or want to follow up on your question, you can send me an email directly. You can reach me at lucas@landlordology.com or lucas@cozy.co. And please check out Cozy. It is truly, truly free. It really is just, in my opinion, the best property management software out there. It's modern. It's free. I would recommend it even if I didn't work for Cozy, and I'd use it just because it's made my life easier. Like I said, I haven't had a late payment in over 2 years since switching to Cozy, and I had used other programs before that. So check it out. Please give me some feedback too. If you have any questions or comments or just constructive criticism about this webinar, please do email me and reach out. I'd love to meet you guys. We're going to be in 2 locations upcoming this year. One is the National Apartment Association National Conference in San Francisco on June 16th and 17th, this next month. We have a booth there, and we also have a learning zone. So I'll be teaching on the power of free software, and not just Cozy, but other tools that you can use that are free that will help you run your property management business. And then we'll also be at the NARPM, which is the National Association of Residential Property Managers, national conference in Maui, where I'm also speaking there. So we're eager to meet you and connect with you and just help you along this way, because I really do believe that we'll all succeed at this if we just stick together. So I hope you feel our hearts, and I hope you see that this tool is amazing. So thanks again for your attendance, and we'll see you later. See you next time.